And welcome into the Week 14 edition of the Consistently Cashin podcast. I'm Colby Conway at Colby R. Conway over on X. And with me here, my usual co-host, Ron Rigney, who can let you know where he is on X. Playoffs, ? That's not his Twitter handle or his X handle. So he'll let you know that. But obviously, if you haven't checked it out already, Ron and I just recorded the Prop It Like It's Hot podcast. So if you want your player prop fix for the Week 14 slate, make sure you go check that out. But Ron, long time no talk. How is everything going for you?
Going great, man. You know, it's playoffs. It's my quote for most of my teams in yearly leagues because I can't say that. Questioning if I'm going to get in. I got some playoff teams going, so we'll see what happens with that. But just got our props out of the way. I think I feel pretty good about those for the week. Win a little bit of holiday cash for you there, but also win a little cash for you here. Missed it by a little bit last week, but I think I built something I kind of like. I'm hoping you can help me out with the flex spot here. I was a little iffy on that, but as always, I think we're kind of headed in the same direction. So let's get after it.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead and do it. Looking at the DraftKings slate for Week 14, I will tell you there is some weather here that's got me a little bit concerned. And there's going to be some games that are very interesting, and we'll have to look at it and evaluate it from a weather standpoint. But we look at the quarterback position, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes going up against one another there. So obviously one of the higher game totals on the slate. There's going to be a lot of ownership there. Then we got Lamar Jackson going up against the Rams and CJ Stroud, both of whom are playing in some interesting weather conditions. So we'll have to see if there's any reason to go with those two. Then we drop down Justin Herbert, Justin Fields, and the likes below there. So looking at the quarterback position here, Ron, who did you find yourself gravitating towards?
You know, as I look down at, I hate to try to go back to the same guys that we use every week. And there's a couple here in the mid-price range that I really liked. I kind of stayed away from the guys at the top. I think the most expensive guy that I considered going with was Justin Fields sitting there at 6,800. But, you know, we went to the well, I think, a couple weeks ago with this, and it paid off, and I like the matchup. So I like Brock Purdy an awful lot for $6,500 against Seattle. Seattle's kind of middle of the road against the pass. But we've seen the last couple of weeks, especially since they came off that bye, the Niners look like the Niners that we think they would look like. You see Deebo Samuel coming to life. Brandon Ayuk has been lights out all season. George Kittle et al. They've got all the weapons, but I like that matchup against Seattle. I think there's going to be some points scored there, and like I said, he came through for us. I believe it was 2 weeks ago, if not last week, if I remember correctly.
Last week, yes.
Okay.
It was last week. He used him against Philly. It was way too cheap. I don't mind Purdy. I really like Justin Fields. The stack with DJ Moore is very affordable. I think you can very easily do that this week. I would really like to be in on Josh Dobbs, who's getting Justin Jefferson back with TJ Hawkinson and Jordan Addison. But after that last game, I'm a little petrified to use him with the 4 picks. And I mean, if you take away those 4 picks at -2, that's 8 points, 16.5 points is pretty darn good at 5,900. So I'm not opposed to looking at Josh Dobbs. And I do like Russell Wilson this week. I'll be honest, just because the Chargers have been an absolute dumpster fire on defense, allowing the 4th most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks this season. So I think you can look to Russell Wilson down there as well. So definitely some options at quarterback there. And if you come down a little bit, I'm going to keep beating the drum for Gardner Minshew. He's got plenty of weapons. He keeps getting it done. I mean, look, other than maybe these 2 games here, here's 3x. Here's about almost 5x, more like 4x. But he's there. He's got the weapons, and it's another good matchup for him. And I like points to be scored in that Cincy Indy game, which I think we'll talk about at the receiver position. So, yeah, there's many different ways you can go at quarterback here this week. But looking at the top, Lamar Jackson, CJ Stroud, Justin Herbert, those 3 are pretty easy fades for me. Just because if I'm getting up in this price, I'm going to get to Allen or Mahomes, and I would rather just pay down for some of those guys in that tier anyway. So, don't think I'll have much exposure to any of them. Head over to running back. I'll be honest with you, Ron. I was going to be all in on Alvin Kamara this week, but I can't stand this price point for him. There's so many questions with that offense. I mean, he gets so much receptions or work in the receiving game. I want to use him. It's such a good matchup too that I want to use him, but I have a very hard time trusting any New Orleans Saint this year.
No, I looked at that as well, and I wanted to like Kamara and the matchup itself. It's kind of like when you mentioned Justin Herbert at quarterback. I like the matchup itself. I don't like the price I'm paying for it for what I think I'm going to get, and I feel the same way here. He's involved in passing game, but we've seen Derek Carr, we've seen that offense, and that offense is I want no part of it. I don't think at any level. of fantasy unless I absolutely have to. I think there's a couple different ways that we could go and get more bang for our buck here without paying that $8,200.
So then where are we going along those lines? Like we got Kyron, who's in a tough matchup, but I mean, it seemed like you just have to start him at any point this year. You talked about Jahmyr Gibbs over on the Prop It Like It's Hot podcast, so go check that out there. Obviously, Pacheco's got the out symbol. So does Jonathan Taylor. So that opens the door to Zach Moss and Clyde Edwards-Helaire being value plays. But where'd you end up settling in at running back?
At the 2 running back spots, I ended up staying about the same price point. I went with Alexander Mattison at 5,500 against Vegas, and I went with Joe Mixon 6,100 against Indy. Had a couple touchdowns last week. I feel like with Jake Browning, I don't know if Jake Browning is what we think he is after last week. We'll see. But Colts and both the Colts and the Raiders bottom 10 in giving up fantasy points to running backs. And I feel like the work is going to be there for both of them. I feel like if it's not there with the handoffs from Madison, he's going to be involved in the passing game as well. I know Justin Jefferson, like you said, is back, but I feel like for them to win that game, they're going to have to lean on Madison a little bit. And the matchup lends itself to him to be able to score some decent points at $5,500. But I feel pretty good about both those guys.
Somehow I got muted.
There we go. There we go.
No clue how that happened. But would you play? Let me re-say it all again.
Okay.
Would you play Clyde Edwards-Helaire at 4,200 with Pacheco out, or does this just seem like this is going to be the Mahomes legacy game and he's going to throw it 50 times and they're going to run it 9?
I went that route just on my flex just because that's all the money I had left over. I got down in that $4,200 range. I didn't like a whole lot else there. I don't love it. I mean, there could be. I'm hoping for a touchdown out of him, maybe a goal line touchdown. But it just seems when we think we figured out what the Chiefs are going to do and we figure out what Andy Reid's going to do, we never know what Andy Reid's going to do. And I think you could be exactly spot on. They might want to just throw it every single time. But I think for the price point, I'm willing to take a flyer on it. Like I said, that's what I had to end up going with my flex. He's $4,200, and in that range, at any position, but especially at flex, don't like too much there. So I don't love it, but I get it if you have to do it.
For sure. I will give a nod to Dameon Pierce just because there's going to be a lot of running in that game with the wind and the rain. So I wouldn't be surprised if Pierce gets 15 carries, has some better results this week against the Jets, who you will have better success running on them than throwing. So other than that, I'm not really seeing much, to be honest, here that really kind of gets me going in terms of playing there. So let's go to wide receiver. Stephon Diggs, obviously highest price receiver on the slate in a very good matchup against Kansas City. Justin Jefferson makes his return. Where'd you end up going if you didn't end up paying for a top tier receiver here in your lineup? If you didn't, where would you be comfortable going should you have the funds?
Like you said, I like that Diggs matchup at that $8,800 price tag. It's kind of hard to swallow. I ended up going down a little bit further. I like the price point that we're seeing those Niners receivers at. They're right in the same vicinity. I think it's just a matter of which one you like more. I went ahead and went with Brandon Ayuk at 6,900. You talked about DJ Moore in the Prop It Like It's Hot. Went with him at 65. And then for my third one, a little bit further down the line, went with Elijah Moore at $4,500. I don't necessarily like the quarterback situation there, but if we've got Amari Cooper, I think he's still listed as questionable. I don't think I've seen if he's playing or not. We've seen Elijah Moore kind of step up in his absence. I think there'll be targets there. It's just a matter of the matchup's not bad as well. You can throw against Jacksonville a little bit. It just, like I said, don't trust the quarterback situation there a whole lot, but somebody's going to have to catch the football. And at $4,500, I really, really like that price for what he's been able to put up without Amari Cooper being in that lineup.
I am not a doctor in any sense of the word, but I will note Amari Cooper did not practice Wednesday and Thursday, was only able to get to a limited Friday. So I don't know if that will lend itself for him to clear concussion protocol before the game. So that's something to consider. Even with Cooper, I like Elijah Moore if he's going to get a ton of targets. I would also make sure that Flacco's starting and not Dorian Thompson-Robinson, because I do believe DTR was cleared from the report. Yeah, he logged a full on Friday. So that should be He might be available. But if they go Joe Flacco, the rapport is there with Elijah Moore. I do like a very cheap Elijah Moore. I do like Jamar Chase a lot against Indy just because they struggle against perimeter receivers. So I think you can go with him. I do love Deebo Samuel of the San Fran receivers just because he owns Seattle. And I mean, owns Seattle. And then if you go Russell Wilson, I like Cortland Sutton. Chargers are bad. Sutton's good. The rapport is there with Russell Wilson. So I like Cortland Sutton. Let me ask you one question here. If you're going to go with a Kansas City receiver, would you prefer to go Kelsey at tight end, or do you go Rashee Rice at 5,400? Because it seems like the breakout's here.
I mean, if I'm going with what I trust and what I was already looking at before, I kind of struggled at tight end this week. I don't know how you felt about it. We'll talk about it here in a minute, but I did look at Travis Kelce. It's kind of tough to get him in at that price at $7,800. I think it comes down to just the way the rest of your lineup's built is if what you can afford. I would rather go with Kelce, but I'm afraid that the way I built my lineup, I'm not going to be able to afford him. So if I'm going to go with KC receiver, I think Rice is the guy. I think those are the only two that you even consider. I don't think you even look at anybody else that catches the football for Kansas City Chiefs.
I would agree. And I'll also give a shout out to Drake London at this price because Tampa Bay is one of the most generous to wide receivers. So look to Drake London. Let's go to tight end. I don't love the position, if I'm being honest. It's a great matchup for Sam Laporta. I don't know how else to say it. Chicago is one of the friendlier teams to tight ends all year. While the Vegas hasn't been like overly generous to tight ends this season, it's kind of hard to not at least consider TJ Hawkinson on any given week. So I like him at 6,000. I like Kincaid if you don't want to go Stephon Diggs. Try to get a little bit of variance from the Buffalo side of things. Dalton Schultz is out, so that opens the door to value Brevin Jordan again. Might only be short passes in the wind and rain there in New York, so he could be an option if you're going to go value. The one I kept coming back to is Isaiah Likely. I don't love the weather there, admittedly, but he's dynamic enough with the ball in his hands. Rams have allowed the 8th most fantasy points per game to tight ends this season, and they're also one of just 8 teams that have allowed 6 receiving touchdowns to the position. So maybe he can get in line there. So I do like Isaiah Likely at $3,500 as well. But what say you about the state of affairs at the tight end position?
I mean, it's just as gross as Bob and I talk about on the consistency show every single week. We get to the tight end position and then you just hear a collective groan come out of both of our mouths because there's not much going on there. And it's the same way this week. There's guys that I like, but here again, it's kind of like what we talked about with some of these receivers and running backs. They're just so expensive. I ended up settling on George Kittle. It's a middle of the road matchup, but that offense is rolling. He's been involved. Kyle Shanahan's figured out ways to get him the football, and George Kittle's probably one of my favorite players as well. So I have a little man crush on him too. But $5,900, he was quite a bit cheaper than Kelsey, considerably cheaper considerably cheaper than Kelsey, almost $2,000. And then he's right there with some of the other guys that we like here, with Laporta and Hawkinson and the usual suspects. But I could easily be talked into going with Isaiah Likely. That was the guy that, if you're going to go with the value play there because of your lineup build, I like him a lot. Dude's a great athlete. And if they didn't have Mark Andrews, I think it'd be kind of scary as to what Isaiah Likely would become and will become once he gets an opportunity. But at that price point, I think he's definitely, like you said, that matchup is awesome. It's just the weather gives me a little bit of reservation. But I like everything you said about the weather as far as the short pass game. I think you're spot on with that.
Yep, and may actually prove to benefit him. So let's go to defense. Finally, they get some respect on their name. Texans, the highest priced defense on the board, playing in crappy weather against Zach Wilson. Will be interesting, though. Will Anderson, he was a limited on Wednesday, full on Thursday, didn't practice at all Friday. So little interesting there. If Texans don't have Will Anderson, could be interesting as Jonathan Grenard would be their main pass rusher. And then I guess Derek Barnett, who they just signed, would start getting in the mix there with some pass rush snaps as well. So have to see how that plays out for the Texans defense. I don't know if we're going to have the money to go up to them. So I'll tell you, I'm not going to beat around the bush here. I kept coming back to Cleveland. I'm banking that Trevor Lawrence doesn't play. I don't know if he will or not yet. Seems like he's still questionable, but a $3,000 Cleveland Browns defense is a pretty good investment in terms of my eyes with the talent that they have. But where did you end up going on defense?
I like that a lot. I looked at that. I looked at your Texans, of course. I looked at the Bucs, of course, too. I know they're bad against the pass on the outside, but that front seven's pretty solid. And you've got Desmond Ridder there at quarterback, so I think they can force at least 1 or 2 interceptions. I ended up settling on the other half of that game with the Jaguars, especially if DTR plays. Jaguars at $3,600. I like that a lot. But when you look at the Browns too, when you look at what they're going to cost you for how good of a defense they have been all season, they've done it all year. At $3,000, that's going to, I think, allow us to open up some money for some things back up at the top. So I settled on the Jags in my lineup build, but I'm gonna take that $600. I like Cleveland there a lot.
Yep, we'll see what money we have. That's what comes down to it. So let's begin the lineup the way we always do. You get one player that's locked in no matter what. I get one player that's locked in no matter what. I'll let you go first.
I got to go with Joe Mixon. You got a guy at quarterback that has a ton of question marks. I know he got it done last week, but are we going to see that every single week? And even with him getting it done last week, Joe Mixon was still heavily involved. But I feel like for $6,100, as generous as Indy has been to opposing running backs, Mixon's going to get the ball 20 plus times with the quarterback back there. So the opportunities are going to be there at $6,100.
I hear you loud and clear. I'm going to go ahead and add in DJ Moore, favorite wide receiver in terms of expected production per dollar. So I'm going to throw DJ Moore in there. And this doesn't necessarily tie us to Justin Fields because we may end up being able to go like Purdy and Debo, or who knows where we'll end up coming out with. So let's go ahead. Let's take a look at the quarterback position here. Where do we want to go? I think we may end up having to come and switch off of this depending where we end up going later on with our build. But what are you thinking here?
Well, like I said, I don't mind the Justin Fields play. I talked about Brock Purdy as well. If you go down a little bit further, if you really want to save some cash, Gardner Minshew. I think the one I feel probably the best about with what we've already got DJ Moore in there. I like that Justin Fields DJ Moore stack because he is the guy that Justin Fields is going to look for. And like I said, you can throw a little bit on Detroit. There's going to be some points scored. Feel pretty good about that for no more than you're giving up for both guys.
Yep, and who knows? We could always put Laporta at tight end, and then we got it coming back on the other side there with that game too. And that's a game I like to stack. The weather seems a lot better than it was going to look earlier in the week, so I think we're going to be safe there. Next, running back. So we could go Jahmyr Gibbs. That would give us that would be some positive correlation, and that we're saying Chicago's going to score. Detroit's going to have to throw it to keep up. That benefits Jahmyr Gibbs, so we can look at him at 6,600. We could drop down, just go another value play with Zach Moss, take both running backs in that Indy-Cincy game, or we go down to your Alexander Madison call. They're down there as well. So what are you thinking here?
I think Madison's probably my favorite one, just given the $5,500. I think the touches are going to be there. Like I said, Justin Jefferson's going to be back, but is he going to be rusty at all? I don't know. Josh Dobbs back there. I think they're going to have to lean on Alexander Madison a little bit if they want to win the game.
I am good with that as well. So we're doing okay money-wise. Maybe we get another value receiver mixed in here. We don't have any Buffalo, Kansas City left. So do you want to throw Rashee Rice in there? That way we get some exposure to the Kansas City offense. And then Buffalo, maybe we end up going Kincaid. Maybe we have enough for Stephon Diggs. Do you want to throw Rice in there?
Put Rice in there just because we're not going to be able to afford Kelsey, and we got to get some exposure to that because they're going to throw it early and often. They are.
Yep, I would agree there. So we've got another receiver spot here. We're 19. We're not doing horrible. We got a fighter's chance here of making some magic happen. Other wide receiver spot. Do we go another value with Elijah Moore? I think we're going to end up going a little bit of value at tight end. So we may actually be able to fit in a big receiver here. Do you want to put Stephon Diggs in and just see where the money comes out?
Yeah.
All right, so tight end, the Diggs basically puts us out of Laporta range. I don't think we need, if we go put Kincaid, we're probably just gonna have to switch to Josh Allen and go full blown Buffalo. What about Likely?
I'll say, what do we look like if we have Likely in there?
If he can give us 8 again, that wouldn't be bad. A little over 2 times. 7,400, assuming we do 3 for a defense, 4,400 for a flex, that would put us right around Elijah Moore range.
Okay.
So let's see. So defense, we're going to have to go. Actually, we probably could go the pick of our lip. How much is Elijah Moore?
4,500.
Actually, we wouldn't be able to get him with a $3,000 defense. So okay.
Is there anything else around that price point though that we like?
I like the Browns, but I would need Trevor Lawrence to be out. I think the Vikings defense is going to be fine against Vegas because they're so blitz heavy, and Aiden O'Connell hasn't been good against the blitz. And I mean, they're putting up some points. So Minnesota's kind of intriguing.
And they've gotten a lot better as season's gone on too. It's kind of as that defense is gone, that team is gone, and they've picked it up quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with Vikings or Cleveland, and if we do hear that Trevor Lawrence is out, it's an easy pivot because it's going down. You don't have to clear any money elsewhere.
Okay.
So let's put the Vikings with the caveat that if Lawrence is out, we go to Cleveland. And then 4,300 for a flex. Cole Kmet. No, I don't want Robert Woods in that game. Smith and Jigba's kind of appealing. He's been getting a little bit more run of late, and 11 targets last week. Only had 3 in that game against San Fran previously, but how much can we take from that? There's got to be some.
Jameson Williams is there, kind of intriguing, pretty inconsistent. Do we?
No, I think that's Jamal.
Is that Jamal? I thought that was Jameson. Oh, okay,
Jameson would be interesting. I mean, there's Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah,
but we already have Rashee Rice. I don't know if I quite want to go there. Okay, what if? Okay, so let's look at it this way. So if we end up putting in, let's just say Njigba, we're basically looking at Stephon Diggs and Smith and Njigba. If we take out Diggs, what other like higher tier receiver would we look to? Probably like Jamar Chase, or would you get Ayuk or Debo?
I mean, Jamar Chase at 7,600 is pretty intriguing. I still don't like the fact that we don't have either Ayuk or Debo in there.
Okay. Now we're split because I know you said Ayuk and I'm more Debo this week, so we're gonna have to make a call.
I mean, I could go either way on it. Like, the reason I went with Ayuk is because I think we picked him last week, and Debo was the guy that ended up getting most of the exposure. I don't think Ayuk was terrible. I just went back there just because I don't expect 2 straight weeks of that. But I mean, I can be talked into either one.
Yep. I mean, Ayuk still put up 13. I'll make this. I'm gonna put Debo.
Okay.
So then that gives us 6,300 now for a flex.
Ooh,
so there's Laporta. We could go Cortland Sutton. I liked Sutton.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I mean, I could go. I would prefer Sutton to Kittle.
Okay.
And we already have Debo. Okay, so do you prefer Debo Sutton or Diggs, Smith, and Jigba?
I think Debo Sutton. I think the floors are higher on those two.
I think so too. Consistency is better. Cortland Sutton's been one of the more consistent receivers this year. So that'll do it for the Week 14 consistently cashing. Justin Fields, Joe Mixon, Alexander Madison, DJ Moore, Rashee Rice, Debo Samuel, Isaiah Likely, Cortland Sutton. Vikings defense, you do have $200 left over. So when it comes to the defense, should Trevor Lawrence be ruled out, you could drop down to the Browns, no problem. Or maybe you are anti-Matthew Stafford. You can even get up to the Ravens if you want to take the Ravens D in a bad weather game there. You will have that option there at defense. So Ron, let everyone know where they can find you. What you got here at BigGuyFantasySports.com.
At Ron Rigney on the X Machine, BigGuyFantasySports.com. Go check out Thursday night's episode of the Consistency Football Show, highlighting some guys that are somewhat consistent. What to expect from them this week. A couple guys that we pointed out, put them on blast a little bit that they have not been as consistent. So check out myself and Mr. Bob Lung. We just got done with the Profit Like It's Hot. I pinch hit for the pioneer of consistency, Mr. Bob Lung. That's why I got my red and white on to match the motif there. Hopefully we can get you a little bit of holiday cash there and here. And check out all of our other friends over at BigGuyFantasySports.com. Stuff coming out on the daily over there that you need to check out.
I will second all of that. Follow me over on X at Colby R. Conway. Check out everything I got here at BigGuyFantasySports.com, which is the Profit Like It's Hot podcast and article. Obviously, this consistently cashing podcast, who's hot, who's not article. Make sure you find everyone here at BigGuyFantasySports.com and give them a follow on X as well and read all of their great work. But that will do it for the Week 14 edition of the Consistently Cashing podcast, and we will see you next week in Week 15.